Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is April 5, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank, today's guest, John Macker, for writing an article on the great, was it Stuart Perkoff?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
how I learned of you.
Yeah.
So it was fun to read this and go, who is this guy? And then you responded, and we did part one of September 13, 2024. It
Yeah.
was truly enlightening for me. And we sort of ended, John, with what was the first human invention? I didn't have you give your guess, but we went into the fact that I've studied this for a while, and people say so many different things. And before I go back into, inventorying them, what's your guess or hunch? What was it? Whether it's tangible or non-tangible, what do you think was the first human invention?
I, I want to say tools, but
Yeah,
um, I don't. I think tools came before language, the real language. I think tools was a solitary uh, uh, activity to like for a successful hunt or to dig or whatever. But it seems to be tools was maybe the first
yeah.
uh, notice that they were thinkers, and that language I think maybe came afterwards,
Yeah.
uh, uh, as we needed to begin to express ourselves. And then comes the cave paintings and Lascaux and Altamira and all those great cave sites with all
Yeah.
that beautiful art for art's sake.
Yeah.
You know,
We got into that too, because you liked when I asked you what was the motive of the cave artist. But what you just said was interesting because various answers. I know my favorite answer ever was an art student. And I says, what was the first human invention? He said, lying.
ah,
And
yeah,
so
probably not too far off. Yeah,
yeah, you're psyching someone out. They're coming to get your food and you psych them out. But
yeah,
anyways, my one friend I think said something intense was the other, understanding that there's someone else besides you. So whether it's seeing your mother's eyes and you see a reflection of yourself in her eyeball, or seeing that she's someone providing you with milk, then my other favorite is the line. Drawing the line is the first human invention, and that's sort of like there's otherness. But
yeah, yeah,
this guy Augusto Paulo and Paulo Freire, they started theater of the oppressed in South America, and they use theater as a means of promoting social and political change. They say that theater was the first human invention, which is pretty interesting because, not thinking of it as we think of theater, but sort of this is what their main emphasis, that the audience becomes active. They're spect actors instead of spectators, and they explore, show, analyze, and transform the reality in which they are living. So I'm just curious your thoughts on this idea of theater, uh, which will lead us into talking about film theater as one of the first human activities.
I yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much because if you think about it, I mean, I would think that just bare bones raw communication is has to be part of that, and
Yeah,
that we early on we had to act out the hunt. We had to act out uh, a desire for sex. We had to act out what we were going to do, and we had an audience of family of like-minded individuals where anthropods or Homo sapiens that were hanging around the campfire, we had to act out our story. And
Yeah.
we became storytellers early on. And I think that's maybe what they're getting at. And that is it theater? Sure, it's theater. Yeah, why
Yeah.
not? They had to perform uh, what was happening. They had to perform their evolution. They had to perform the next move they'd make so that they would survive. So I see that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
performing and articulating, gesticulating, uh,
Yeah.
grunts, whatever it took to get the others' attention, so that they would know, hey, we got to go on a hunt, so we
Yeah.
don't starve to death. And here's how we can do it.
Yeah, I love you said the word grunt too, because is grunting language? Yeah, but it's not like official. They eventually know this grunt means that, and that grunt means
Right,
this. But
right. It's not Sartre or Camus. It's you got to get to the river. How are you going to get to the river? And how are you going to tell the guy we got to get to the river? Or how you going to tell the guy there's some antelope down there at the
yeah,
bottom of the ravine? How do we get down there? You
yeah,
got to grunt it out. You have to, follow me. That's got to be one of the early
yeah.
suggestions.
Suggestions. That's amazing because this woman, some famous writer, was on NPR and she said, I was raised in the Caribbean and my mother never learned how to read, but she knew what to do when a tsunami hit from a song that she sang. So
Yeah,
that's the thing. Did we sing before we started talking? Well, yeah, that's what grunting is, right? Grunting's
yeah,
kind of like singing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's communication, and
Yeah.
if you sang, if you write on the walls, if you etch, or if I mean, when was the first laugh?
Oh, that's a good one.
When was the first humor or the first
Right.
amusement? I think that as soon as they got to a point where um, their lives were maybe not in danger at that moment, that
Yeah.
left time for things like humor. And
Yeah.
I think it goes back to uh, communicating with the others and uh, gesturing, and something's going to make them laugh. They're humans, so they're going to laugh.
That is so heavy because two things. Spike Jones has that routine, like how music started, and it has two cavemen hitting rocks, and then it shows
Right.
the transition, and then it gets to the point, and then Spike Jones came on the music scene, and it has two guys hitting rocks in cave outfits again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that is another thing that came to mind was biomimicry. Is everybody goes, well, humans mimic nature. So the person
Sure.
who invented Velcro saw it in these plants and then invented it. Or we invented mirrors by looking at rivers.
Mhm.
So yeah, that could happen. So did we invent whistling and humming in grunting because we heard animals doing it? In fact, Joyce, there's a theory in the James Joyce world that he had a fear of thunder, and that's how humans invented language, by listening to thunder and imitating it. So, but my thing is, that's biomimicry. We
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
It could be flipped.
Yeah.
Maybe humans were whistling first and the birds heard us and mimicked us.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. They heard the first poem. Yeah. When was the first poem?
When was the first poem is a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we get, well, I wanted to go one more thing about spec actor in this thing about creating the other and
Uh-huh.
to act it out. You're gonna, like you said, the word solitary. That was good. The tool before language was solitary. You could have a tool on your own and maybe do that, but language is sort of like between another person. So
Right.
Elmore, I spoke with this guy. You might know him. One of the most amazing poetry guys I've ever. Bill Moore, Mohr. He wrote a book called Handouts: The History of LA Poets from 48 to 92. That's his like most known book, but he's in that whole world,
Uh-huh.
completely. He's
Yeah.
taught poetry in Long Beach for
Yeah.
20 years. He's so articulate. And he told me Elmore Leonard, the writer, says the job of the writer is to get the reader to the next sentence. Like just get them to
Yes.
read the next sentence.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the job. Well, no, it's to do this or that. Like it's all back to that motive thing.
Right.
So
Right.
it's how important the other person is. So I know you're a film person and you wrote film criticism, and I wanted to delve into film a little because my take
Sure.
on film, and I've done it for years too, my take on film is that in 130 years we basically just film theater. We just film plays. I mean, Peter Greenway said it great. He says, Marty Scorsese ain't doing nothing different than D.W. Griffith. They're just filming plays. Now, we know Marty's done this or that, and he's a great filmmaker, but
Right.
really, it's just filming plays. Now, there's variations on that. So,
Of course. Of course.
your thoughts. McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or bad film. It's a good or bad viewing experience. Any comment?
No, there's bad films. That's why you have a bad viewing experience, is because the film is
That's the
unrewarding.
cause.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
but
like whenever the camera, and I think it was in the 30s, begin to move, and
yeah,
it no longer filmed just the proscenium
yeah.
on stage.
There you
Things
go.
began to move, and the camera was moved outside. The camera moved along with the human being. The camera became first person omniscient. Um, those were, like mini revolutions in the art form.
There you
And
go.
it's like you watch a film like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf,
Oh my God.
and it's so dynamic on stage. But what did the director do? Who was, what's his name? I
Mike
forget.
Nichols.
Mike Nichols. Thank you. His first film, and he just put the camera inside the living room and filmed their faces and moved the camera around, moved some of it outside, and I think he did kind of an interesting, kind of uh, elastic thing with the camera.
That's a
Just
great word.
put it, with the actors on the stage.
Dude, let me tell you, you illustrate exactly. I interviewed Haskell Wexler, who shot that film,
Oh
and
God, Haskell Wexler's magnificent. Medium Cool is unbelievable.
medium cool is like
Yeah.
he tied a rope around his waist and around Elizabeth Taylor's waist, and when she spins they're connected by a rope. That ain't
Wow.
no whatever they call that gizmo that you can shoot.
Oh, steady cam.
Yeah, that ain't no steady cam, man. That is
No,
a rope.
no, no.
And
Oh,
you
he was
can't
an
really.
innovator. Yeah. Haskell
Yeah,
Wexler was way innovator. Yeah.
yeah. But that elastic thing, you really said it well. And the other thing personally that I love is um uh Liz Taylor calls Richard Burton houseboy in that film.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we watched that several times, and so she calls me houseboy.
What an insult. Yeah. Total insult. Yeah.
Oh, she's calm. Yeah, it is, but it is fun. It's a fun,
Yeah.
teasy thing. So now on to this thing about the function of cinema. Peter Greenaway says cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. My question is, are experimental filmmakers doing something completely different or telling a story a different way? Like, Tony Conrad's The Flicker is 15 minutes of black and white flickering on and off. That isn't storytelling per se, but a story might go through our heads when we watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're just your thoughts on this quote by Greenaway: "Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers." Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Sure, sure. I
Yeah,
mean, who wrote down the fact that films had to tell stories?
yeah,
You know it's not a storyteller's medium per se. You know, it's like what did the great Stan Brakhage, the independent filmmaker,
yeah,
he said, uh, theater is the playwright's medium, but film
yeah.
is the actor's medium. And I always
Wow.
thought that was an interesting quote. And he didn't even mention directors, in it,
Yeah,
or Artaud, or whereas you think that film is a director's medium. Well, yeah, it
yeah,
can be, but no, I don't think just because you put out a visual image doesn't mean you have a story to tell.
yeah. It's
I
funny
guess you
because
can interpret it if you want to,
yeah,
and that, but it doesn't demand that.
yeah. There's a
Fiction is storytelling. Playwriting is storytelling, but
yeah. Well, that's funny because we kind of ended part one on what's the difference between narrative and storytelling. Um, but first I want to inject. Yeah, I'm glad you dropped Stan Brakhage, because Godard said another cute quote was Hollywood films are just documentaries of actors acting.
exactly. Sure, sure, sure.
But it, you know, but he makes it he breaks the fourth wall, and he makes you realize, oh, wait a minute, you're not supposed to break the fourth wall. Woody Allen does it in many films. You turn to the camera and you turn to the
Yeah,
audience
yeah,
and start talking to them,
yeah.
you know. But when you say narrative and storytelling, that's funny, because another great experimental filmmaker, Andrew Noren, says if you put one frame after another, that is narrative, that is storytelling. If the
Sure.
frames are abstract, that's still one thing after another. But we normally think of storytelling as actors, plot, character development, and all that.
I look at storytelling as language. You have to have
Yeah,
language. You
yeah,
can have film has its own language, I'm sure,
yeah,
we all
yeah,
know that. That's fine. I mean,
yeah,
Eisenstein talked about that.
yeah,
Eisenstein proved that, but I don't know. I don't think that it has the impact that language does when you use language to
yeah,
tell a story or to indicate something. Now, there's good examples of film uh, portraying great literature. It can do that, without too much of a problem, but it has a text that it works from. Pure cinema doesn't have a text to me, unless we're talking about the visual language and all that. And I'm not, I don't mean quite that, but
yeah.
it probably has its own language. But, frame by frame, I guess you could consider that storytelling, but
No,
it's how much do you participate in it?
yeah,
How much does the viewer participate? You
yeah,
know, all that.
yeah. Because the reason I brought that up was because one of my podcast guests said narrative does not lie, and storytelling does. It was something like that.
Right. Right.
Narrative doesn't lie.
Well, that's what's been argued about poetry for ages. Does it need to be narrative? Does it work as an abstraction?
Yeah.
Does the poem have to tell a story? Does the
Yeah.
poem have to reach you on that level? Or can the poem just be a series of images? Is that going to turn you on? And I like how poetry, works that same kind of ground.
Amazing. Yeah, because I have this poetry quote here by Ben Holden. Crying and poetry are in different ways articulations of the inexpressible.
Sure, sure. Although they're two expressions, though.
They are that
Crying
it
is
is.
expression, poetry is an expression.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure what he's talking about. When I going back to film for a second, when I think of great films or films that have always turned me on
Yeah.
or classics and things like that, I think of the imagery of it, yes, what I've seen, but really and it's probably because I'm a writer, I think of lines in it that have stayed
Uh,
with me for years. The literature of it, the language spoken, the dialogue. I will remember that long after I've forgotten other things about the film, but I'll remember snippets of dialogue, conversation, monologues, whatever, and that's stayed with me over the years.
it's a really good point. What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Right, right, exactly. It's like let's go back to Easy Rider, and it was a visually stunning film. It was beautiful to look at. It was written by Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, and a great writer named Terry Southern.
Oh my
And
God.
Terry Southern wrote the Jack Nicholson character. He wrote the George
Yeah.
Hansen character. And at the end of that film, right, the campfire scene before um, George Hansen is killed, he talks. It's the scene between his getting killed and the diner scene with the racists and
Yeah.
the supposed rednecks and everything. And he talks about something in that film that has not changed over all of these years.
Yeah.
And he talks about um, how the people in those environments, the South, whatever, they are scared about what you represent with your motorcycle, your long hair, your hippiedom, whatever, and it scares them. And when they get scared, they get angry, and Dennis Hopper says to him, and he says, "What you represent scares them." And
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper says, "Well, that doesn't make them running scared." And Jack Nicholson says, "No, that makes them dangerous." That's one of the great lines that have, I don't know, just that I've
Yeah.
always remembered, and
That's
how it applies to today as well. It hasn't
it.
changed.
It's so beautiful how you articulated that and spelled it out because I could see it all. I'm friends with Terry's son Niall, and he's upheld his dad's legacy. He's
Oh,
making he's making a doc on. I should hook you two up. You would love him.
yeah,
He's making a documentary on his dad for years, and it's
yeah.
not. But we've had him on the podcast several times. And
Oh,
Terry,
great.
Terry is credited in realistic terms for writing the funny dialogue in Doctor Strangelove.
Absolutely,
He
absolutely.
made it
Which
funny.
nobody expected, which Stanley Kubrick didn't really, expect. He just wanted
Right.
another voice in there to write it, along with what's his name, and yeah, he added a whole nother dimension and made it as great as it is.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because Ben Watson has written a lot of books about cinema. He's a friend of mine. I've had him on a podcast, and he wrote this article in last year in Hollywood Reporter, I think. Yeah, and he says the motion picture is the greatest means of mass communication ever devised. And as far as anyone can tell, nothing is ever going to top it. And frankly, nothing ever should. Now that's
Yeah,
pretty bold. It's pretty bold to say. But in the long run, I mean, there's this funny saying: if you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it. And then if you
right.
can't if you can't dance it, write a poem about it. I mean, isn't when you break it down, what is the greatest mean? I mean, it's stupid to say greatest means of communication, but like me and you are like, I'm a film person, but basically I think films suck basically in the long run. I mean, I've been affected by them, but you've boiled down knowledge of fiction and novels and literature to more so your emphasis is poetry. So I mean,
And
how
plays. I've written plays too. I
and
mean,
plays too, right. So plays, playwright, and poetry. So what's your thought on that movies, because you have the love of movies too, so I'm curious.
well, movies obviously are greatly enhanced and engineered by technology. That's the great thing that movies gives us is an
Right.
interpretation of reality based on technology. And I think Brackage talked a little bit about this too.
Yeah.
And that that it doesn't exist without a machine. It can't exist without technology backing up or behind the creativity.
Yeah.
And so it has its own. I think it creates its own uh, artistic world, its own artistic cunning, its own artistic flavor. Whereas a lot of the other arts do not require that at all.
Yeah.
Although they're saying AI is going to assist everybody, in all of our work, our playwriting, our poetry, our it's probably
but
already in
but
film.
when you say you're in a medium that's more pure, theater and poetry just relies on the pen and pencil and the human. You don't
I don't
really
think
need.
it's more pure. I don't know if it's more pure.
That's what I'm trying to
It's
get
just,
at.
it's. I think it's just broken down communication between myself and what's going on in my head, or the
Right.
playwright, or the poet, or the novelist, as he's writing. You don't need a whole lot of people involved there. Whereas
Yeah.
film you got to have a crew. You got to have
Yeah.
several people, and that was what was that? Andrew Sarris was the great uh,
Loved them. Yeah.
theater critic who had the auteur theory, and he said the director is the author of the film,
Yeah.
and that was very controversial at that
Yeah.
time. Because what about the screenwriter, the cinematographer, the
Yeah.
editor, the actor?
Yeah.
But it
No,
was an interesting
it,
idea.
it's heavy. We're going through a phase now. We watch Fellini films, we watch Woody Allen, we watch Bergman. Now we're watching Preston Sturges, and it's really in Buñuel, and it's the
Yeah,
auteur theory. But Andrew Sarris was one of the great film critics.
yeah,
I love it. We went to
yeah.
lunch with him once, and he took us to his apartment. And he's married to one of the great female film critics, Molly Haskell. And
Oh
we're
yeah,
walking in the
yeah,
hall, and
yeah.
he goes, that's Molly's room, and that's my room.
Right,
It
right.
was classic. But I'm glad you brought up all these people, man. Nobody brings up Brackage and Andrew Sarris to me. But it one other thing, because we've talked about intention, is Sidney Lumet, who's made socially conscious films his whole career, says films can't do diddly squat, but it ain't going to keep me from trying.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, he made. I think he did Serpico, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was his great one of his great Dog Day Afternoon.
Dog Day
And,
Afternoon, amazing. Yeah. But it
and
is funny because, then you go to who's the poet, the guy who says poetry can't do anything after the whole, poetry, Auden said something like, can all these art forms do anything? Well,
right,
of course they can, but
sure.
can they do what the creator intends?
Well, it's like Jim Harrison wrote. He said that uh, America lost itself after Wounded Knee, and I don't know if I exactly believe that or agree
Yeah.
with that, but I know what he's saying, and uh, it's like sickness unto death. It's like Kierkegaard, that when that happened, or civil war or slavery, America became, had to fall into this sickness unto death kind of relationship with history. And
Yeah,
I don't know, that's always kind of interested me, how he whittled that down.
right. Well, it's funny because we know that these things can do something, and we know that some people can intend it to do something. Actually, Richard Modiani says, can films actually do anything? He says, yeah. If James Dean puts his cigarettes in his sleeve
Hmm.
in Rebel Without a Cause, kids will start doing that.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're all, they have to take us to another dimension.
Yeah,
And a lot of films don't do that, but some do.
yeah,
Fellini does. Absolutely,
yeah,
Fellini does. Bergman does. Um, Francis Coppola and Apocalypse Now did it. I mean,
yeah,
they're yeah, they take you to another place in time and they make you stay there.
yeah,
And then it comes and it stays in your soul, in your heart, and
yeah,
which politics can't do, which
yeah.
a lot of things can't do. And
That's why poets should
that's
be
what makes
running.
it heroic, Jerry. That's what makes, I think, heroic when you
That's
make a
what
film,
makes
you do a
poetry.
poem or something like that.
You mean it makes it heroic when it sticks with you?
Yeah, yeah. It makes it not just the act, but that kind of act of communication. If you can touch another person,
Yeah,
there's heroism in that.
yeah. That's beautiful. Now you talk about imagination and going to other land. Like McLuhan had the great line. What human? I asked you, what humanness does the pen extend as a writer? And they asked McLuhan, what humanness does film extend? And people say memory or image. He said the foot, because you're traveling like a magic carpet ride.
Right, right.
So then McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying artists dream awake. And it's not to sound elitist, but we all have creative powers that we use in the middle of the night, and we create these incredible scenarios. But
Hmm.
artists also dream while they're awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that dimensionality,
yeah,
that I was talking about. Yeah, it lets you deal with the world outside of your skin, and it takes you into another part of your brain that you're probably not used to accessing all the time.
yeah.
And yeah, dreams. Yeah, it's our dreams are very visual, so that helps in the creation of things, I think, and gives
Yeah,
it a little bit more elasticity and more options for you.
yeah.
Because the poem can be very visual. Playwriting, of course, is very visual, and uh, makes it look at things a little bit differently. Takes you out of your ego.
Out
Dreams
of your
don't know
ego.
ego. I don't think they respond to your ego.
Yeah. Yeah, you're real wordsmith, John. You're concise and articulate because, we talked about Faulkner saying sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. So, Yoko Ono says, if you dream a dream alone, it's a dream. If you dream a dream with other people, it's reality. So when we watch a film in a big theater all together, we believe we're experiencing that for real.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
it's a reality.
It's a
And
mirror. It's a mirror.
yeah. And here's Ernie Gear, this amazing experimental filmmaker in San Francisco. He says, a moving picture is a real thing. And as a real thing, it is not imitation. It does not reflect on life. It embodies the life of the mind.
Yeah, sure, sure. I believe that. Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think that it can enrich your memories as much as real life experiences can. Because there, when I was a kid and you went to see the Cinerama movies, or you went to see The Great Escape when I was
Yeah.
9 years old. What did I learn from that movie? I learned about World War II. I learned about motorcycles. I learned about camaraderie. I learned about friendships. I learned about caring for other human beings. I learned about landscapes. I learned about Germany, and all that stuff stayed with me. It wasn't real. But it was an event when I was 9 years old. It was an experience. It was an event no less real than getting in the car and taking a trip with the family.
Yeah.
It only occupied 2.5 hours of my life, although subsequently I've seen it I don't know how many times because I never get tired of it. Um, it doesn't date. Um, and they're life experiences, the equivalent of life experiences.
Yeah.
You don't forget them.
That was good because Steve McQueen's the star of The Great Escape. Is that right?
Absolutely, sure,
Okay,
sure.
so I as soon as you said that, I remember how it had an effect on me. He's going to he's on a motorcycle. And by the way, one of my best friends, he used to live next to Steve McQueen, and Steve McQueen would come and steal his motorcycle.
Yeah,
And I was like, he had to take
yeah,
Steve down to Mexico for cancer treatments. But here's what I remember from Great Escape. By you saying that helped me remember Steve McQueen's on a motorcycle and he's coming to a fence and he's got to get over the fence. So
right,
he does a wheelie on an angle so he can literally jump the fence easier at that
right.
angle. And I was like,
Mhm,
holy, that taught us, like you said, architecture, movement,
mhm.
machinery, everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Strategies to escape.
yeah, yeah. And the whole idea behind the film was their absolute innate, stubborn desire to get out.
Yeah.
Whether it's tunneling or climbing the fence and getting shot or stealing a motorcycle, they had to get out, and
Yeah.
they were obsessed with it, and that's what
Yeah.
made the movie kind of interesting. You never think of POWs. Yes, they want to get out and obviously and get back home, get to their families, get out of the war, but by the same token, a lot of your impressions are, well, we're just stuck here.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? When this was this life force that I think was recreated fairly articulately on the screen, and probably talking about heroism as they film Steve McQueen coming back. He was caught, after the jump and everything. He was eventually caught, and they
Yeah.
bring him back in, and they have a new commandant because the old commandant crapped out and this huge escape took place, so he was replaced by this new commandant. Steve McQueen gets out of the vehicle. They unhook his handcuffs, and he just gives the commandant this look. It was amazing, saying, "You've not seen anything yet."
Yeah.
And then they walk him back to the cooler,
Yeah.
and heroic music plays, and they walk him back to the cooler. And it's like, yeah, never give up. So as a 9-year-old,
Yeah.
my God, I can't do that. But they it articulated this part of my life, being 9 years old, so that I could get on my Stingray bicycle and do jumps off the curb, and you know,
Dude,
freedom,
I had a
freedom.
Stingray. I had a Stingray too, and I was just describing it to a friend yesterday. I was like, banana seat, high
Yes.
handlebars. But that's
Yep.
like what I got from Birdman of Alcatraz, Burt Lancaster.
Yeah.
You can be prisoned in a jail and still experience nature and feel like you're free.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's amazing because Warhol said movies teach us everything we know, like how to litter, how to kiss, how to drive a
Yeah.
car. To movies teach us everything. So the flip is Reagan goes to the White House when he's president, and he goes up to the staff and he goes, "Where's the war room?"
Yeah.
And they go, "There's
Yeah.
no war room here." And he says, "Well, I saw it in Kubrick's film," and that's funny to us, but
Yes.
really, he knows that Kubrick is a stickler for detail.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
says, the great line that Terry wrote was, "There will be no fighting in the war room."
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So here's Michael Apted, 40 years ago, great movie director. I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know, Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922. And it really flourished in the 80s with MTV, to the point where Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV.
Mhm.
So Michael says, well, because we can learn to take in information faster. So I asked this question with the bias: can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Oh, I think we can do it. We can bring in information faster. I think
Yeah.
so. Sure. We can be trained to do it. It's like when you watch Scorsese's Mean Streets, which is actually before MTV.
Yeah,
That film is like an elongated MTV rock video
it is. Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Especially when Robert De Niro first walks in the bar to the tunes of what? To the tunes of Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Whatchamacallit? Jumpin' Jack Flash.
From the Jack Flash, and then he dances to Mickey's Monkey by Smokey Robinson, The Miracles.
Yeah,
Man, that
yeah,
that had huge impact
yeah,
on me. Streets. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
But the hidden question really there, John, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
Sure. It's just if we allow ourselves to. I don't know if it's good for the soul or not, if it
Yeah.
washes the soul clean, or how it actually helps us. But yeah, I think we can multitask.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm as good a multitasker as I was 30 years ago, but I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure it's necessary, but yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, was Einstein a multitasker?
Yeah.
Was Oppenheimer a multitasker? Evidently he was,
Yeah.
but I don't know if Einstein was.
Yeah. Well,
Was Sartre a multitasker? I don't know.
yeah. You're what this series is all about, inventing new questions, man, because you have ESP that you just sort of oozed us into the next topic, which is, what is the difference between art and science?
Between art and science,
Yeah.
I, 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 I'm not sure there is a huge difference. I, they're both creative acts. I think science is a creative act.
Yeah.
Um, um, I don't know. That's an interesting question. It's all expression. It's self-expression. You're
Yeah.
compelled to do it. You're compelled to write or make art. You're compelled to think of this problem and sort it out and solve it, and maybe make life better for people. I mean, that's certainly the job of art. And I'm not sure there's a huge difference, although technology probably is one of the formulations of science as opposed to art. Minus film or anything like that.
Well,
But
John, you touched on Einstein, and I'm just going to read a couple quotes about science and art and see what you think of these. Albert said, The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science.
Yeah, well, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the word science etymologically breaks down to the fact or state of knowing.
Right.
So that's funny because that's sort of the opposite. Mystery is not knowing. And so here's Jean Cocteau: art is science made clear.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting because I think that maybe uh, being influenced by art and science, we get influenced by the same sources of the night sky, landscapes, uh, the human body, whatever. I think the same impetus, to do it is there. The same influences come from, the to think about the world, to think about the earth, to think about the planet, to think about the solar system. That's also the domain of the artist as well, especially a visual artist. And yeah, so maybe it comes from some of the same places. It's just directed in different ways.
Yeah.
And there's people who have more aptitude for and more skills to do something more based in technology, uh, to maybe create the larger, the better atomic bomb, um, as opposed to someone who wants to just make the better, book of poetry.
Right. Because here's back to McLuhan, who my one friend finally read some McLuhan and he says he's a poet. So he sort of disguised himself as a poet, but he was an academic teaching literature. And
Right.
he couldn't get through to these kids. So he said, let's study advertising. And so, he was really trying to teach them Pound Elliott, you know, and Joyce. So here's what he said: when we push our paradigms back, we get history. When we push them forward, we get science.
Yeah, I could see that. Sure, sure. But what did Oppenheimer? What's the first thing he said once the atomic bomb went off? What does he do? He goes back, hundreds of years and quotes the Bhagavad Gita. He didn't, you know, quote anything contemporary. He went back to, the source. He went back to the source.
What essentially did the Bhagavad Gita quote say?
Um, what was the famous quote that he? What was it? I am something about I am the creator, destroyer of worlds.
I see.
And uh, it wasn't a spontaneous gesture on his part. It was something that's what he rehearsed, and that's what he was going to say for posterity when that bomb went off.
Yeah.
So he wanted to, add, I, I think he wanted to add a historical and cultural imprint on a moment of savagery
Yeah.
that first bomb was. And that's what he's famous for.
Yeah. Wow.
I
That's
am. What was it? I see. Bhagavad Gita is I am something creator, destroyer of worlds.
yeah. Wow.
And so he already knew the ball game. He already knew what that was going to do, what it was going to be used for. And so that's where science, I think, takes off in a little bit slightly different trajectory than art. Whereas you don't have that baggage of possible destruction. You don't have that awesome baggage that comes with, and it's not just the atomic bomb. It's
Yeah.
the Vietnam. It's all of that. Vietnam
Yeah.
was the first uh, technological war,
Yeah.
and and they talk about what's going on in the Middle East now, or the bombings of Yemen, and
Yeah.
how in a how apocalyptic those little events are, the bombings, the one bomb, the people on the ground.
Yeah.
Artists don't think like that.
Yeah.
Artists
Really?
don't, they say that's not going to be the result of this poem or this painting or this film. Did you ever see one of the best movies I've seen, two best movies I've seen in a long, long time? Uh, one was it was set in Germany in World War II. Um, what I forget the name of it now. It was done by British filmmakers, but it's about the family of the commandant of Auschwitz,
Yeah.
and they live just on the other side of the wall of Auschwitz. And the film shows the juxtaposition of the lives of the family and how pastoral it is, and how the woman loves her garden. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, you can hear the cries and the tortures of the inmates just over the other wall, and how they're being put in gas chambers, and they can hear that. You can hear the yells and the screams and things. And it's just really an extraordinary film, just
Yeah.
extraordinary. And 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 it was like the technology of the gas chambers versus the pastoral
Yeah.
organics of her garden and her family.
Yeah.
And it was just really a meaningful film, just really beautiful. And the other one being, of course, Dunkirk, which
Dunkirk.
is a
Yeah.
fantastic film.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to check both those out, because here's another one about art and science. Chomsky says we learn more about ourselves from literature than from science. So here's Oppenheimer changing the world and then quoting literature. What's your
Yes.
take on that? I mean, I know it's stupid to say more, but what's your take on that? We learn more about ourselves from literature than from science.
Well, it depends on what we want to learn what we want to learn about ourselves.
Yeah.
What drives us? I mean, what do we need to learn about ourselves? Um, if it's about our capacity, our capacity for beauty, or our capacity for destruction, or our capacity for technology, they're both there. They're both meaningful.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make the distinction that there's good science and bad science, and there is, but I don't, that more science is going to be used for nefarious purposes, whereas art won't be. Um, Although I think AI might have something to in the coming years might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
Um,
John, this is amazing. Again, this how you know what my notes are going to coming up. I just started a new page of notes called Lit, and you brought up that word beauty, and I was so much wanting to delve into that. So let's go for that. You know,
yeah, yeah,
so we brought up this thing. One of my dear friends is well versed in the I Ching, and we were bringing up what are the virtues of great art. And he says, I'm leery of cleverness and beauty, because actually we were talking about the about Andy Kaufman new documentary, which I highly recommend, called
uh-huh.
Thank You Very Much. And what Duncan said is, I said, well, he says what he's learned from studying the I Ching is that a great virtue of art is grace. So I'm not sure, well, how does grace and beauty differ? And how does beauty rate? When he says, well, I think cleverness and beauty are kind of overrated. He's more for balance, contemplation, concern for others. What is the deal on beauty? How does beauty rate in what you're saying?
I think it's huge up there.
Yeah,
It's huge. I mean, if you can't aspire to beauty, what can you aspire to?
yeah,
They always used beauty and truth, uh, uh, in the same way, sometimes in the same sentence as truth and beauty, beauty and truth. I don't
Yeah.
think truth can hold a candle to beauty.
Oh, wow.
I don't think truth is necessary for art, but I think
That's
beauty is. Beauty absolutely is. I think it's everything we should aspire to.
yeah,
It's you know, we should become that, among other things, of course, true. But
yeah.
beauty, that's it's that's its beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder.
That is an amazing line, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's exactly what McLuhan did mid-career. He updated the medium is a massage, medium is a message to the user is the content. You know,
right, right. It's like uh, I think it was Rilke who had a short poem about the I think it's the great Monet painting of the
yeah,
woman of the milk woman, the milkmaid, and she's pouring milk into a vase or
yeah,
a bowl, and he wrote this incredible short poem about that, and it's just that you got both hits right there, centuries apart.
yeah. That's amazing because either Cezanne or Monet said, if you paint your painting and you stick it in the bushes and it blends in, it's a good painting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's
I don't
interesting.
know what I don't know what that means, but it takes us
Yeah,
back to art and science. Arthur Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I mean, that's a major quote that we
right.
all kind of grew up on, but it's like I just sort of separated that basically technology, anything we invent is like magic, you know. And
Yeah,
in you
sure,
you
sure.
you you touched on magic in part one a little and the mysterious. And I like that because here's, like I say, the important thing in saying aphorisms is how can you take the aphorism a little farther? How can you put it into a different context, make a new question out of it, or reinvent it? So here's I'll give you a couple reinventions of Arthur Clarke's. Warren Ellis said, any sufficiently advanced civilization is indistinguishable from its nature.
Yeah, yeah. Say that again.
Yeah. So Arthur's is any single sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Warren says any sufficiently advanced civilization is indistinguishable from its nature.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Because then we're trying to find what is nature,
yeah.
is
The nature of us and what are our natures? Yeah, I don't think civilization can exist without that.
yeah. Here's Bruce Sterling. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from its garbage.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. There was the great art movement in the 50s. I think it was they John Chamberlain was a great uh, uh, artist of taking used automobile parts and pounding
Yeah.
them into sculpture.
Oh yeah.
I think he worked in L.A. I think that's where
Oh
he
yeah.
got
He's
famous.
notorious. Yeah.
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 And Rauschenberg was a big fan of
Yeah.
his, and he was very much entrenched in the avant-garde. But what he did with automobile sculpture was a reflection of our consumer culture,
Exactly.
our nature. of as human beings. We just threw shit away when we were done with it.
Yeah.
And we were just tossed. It was a disposable culture, and out of that, he created art.
Yeah.
And then that became the great assemblages movement of George Herms and Wallace Berman, and the
Right.
collage movement of using found objects,
Yeah.
to create great art. I've
That's
got George Herms on my wall right behind me.
Oh my God. When I interviewed George with all these questions years ago, he was the only person, and I would do him live then in coffee houses or art galleries. And
Yeah.
he was the only person who brought a piece of his art and put it next to him while we were talking. One of his assemblages. No, I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
George. George is really special. He loves jazz.
Yes.
He's an amazing guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same with Keenholz, all those guys.
Yes.
They were what Marshall called anti-environmental. It's hard to get that because people think environmental means you're for Mother Nature. No, the environment that the car culture created,
Mhm.
but it's back to that thing. You could look at a Chamberlain and go, that's beautiful, because he sort of reframed it. Like Duchamp
Yes.
said, there's no art without no. Duchamp said the artists of the future will only have to point. So
Right.
all
Right.
Chamberlain did was, dude, there's a car crash. Okay, there's my piece of art.
Right. And what Chamberlain called it, he called it reinvigorating
Yeah,
found objects and
yeah,
making it art. And he did it with very, to us, very crude methods, with
yeah,
hammers and
yeah,
sledgehammers, and he
yeah.
would put chains on it and pull it apart with other vehicles. And it was a very, but at the same time, it was a very physical activity. It was physical art.
Oh
And
yeah,
we represented him at our gallery that I worked at in Santa Fe.
nice.
And he was a poet, though. He studied at Black Mountain College.
Oh, did he
And
really?
yeah,
Wow.
and he was very, very, very much influenced by Charles Olson
Oh yeah.
and those babies. And he would call little works of his art by these crazy little juxtaposed titles. Like he
Oh
would call a little beat up fender sculpture. He would call it, like, for instance, uh, 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 sweet seedling shoehorn.
yeah.
And he would just take these words and just kind of throw them together and reconfigure them. They had nothing to do with describing his art. It's just he liked putting these little crazy little poetic titles to his work. And he was real influenced by the Black Mountain folks. And
Dude, Black Mountain is all my heroes, and Creeley and
yeah,
Olson and
yeah,
Cage and all of them. That's beautiful. You bring them
yeah,
up.
Merce Cunningham and
Yeah.
Edward Dorn was there for a short period of time.
But John, I want to go back to that word beauty, because I like that you like that as aspiration, and how does beauty rate? But I forgot to interject this one, and it covers a lot what we're talking about. This is Frank Zappa in 1979. It's sort of his little mini manifesto. He says, knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom is not truth. Truth is not beauty. Beauty is not love. Love is not music. Music is the best. So he sort of is running through all these things that we've talked about: truth, well, with knowledge and wisdom. But beauty is not love. And everybody, wants to aspire. When I ask my first question, what's the best thing for a human being? 50% of people go love. And that's a good answer.
Yeah,
That's fine. I like it. And,
yeah.
one of the great Venice homeless dudes who scored big time writing Nature Boy, Inabe, he says it all in Nature Boy. He says, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return. But I'm curious your thought of Frank sort of knocking down all these terms. Talk about
Yeah.
environmental knowledge, wisdom, truth, beauty, love. They're all not. They're not that.
Well, that's because music was his art,
Yeah,
and anything that feeds your art, is a component of your art.
yeah,
Not maybe an essential a component or essential part of it, but it's a component of it. It helps reinvigorate, going back to that line of the end product, and his end product was a song. So yeah,
yeah,
all that other stuff led up to that truth and love and all that fed the art. Oh, I believe in that, absolutely. I
yeah.
believe in that. I
I
wouldn't have answered love, as part of that question, but
Yeah, it is. It is. Twain, when you got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah,
When
and
you-
we're recycling. As artists, we recycle stuff.
yeah,
Whether it's absolutely in the physicality of what John Chamberlain was doing, or writing a play, or a poem, or a song, it's
yeah,
recycling. You know, things that we can use to make it better, supposedly.
yeah. That's back to Harold Bloom. The anxiety of influence. You absorb your influence, then you abandon them. And it's like,
Yes.
good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. How do you not become a clone of we know Frank was a clone of Spike Jones and Edgar Varese. I mean, all
Correct.
these people come from, Joyce is the big one, man. We know he came from
Yeah.
Dante and Vico and
Hmm.
it's endless,
Yeah.
so it is, how do you reinvent that
Right.
is
Right.
forever, so this is another one I'd love for you to just comment on, any thoughts. It's McLuhan on Joyce, saying Joyce has solved problems which science has not yet formulated as problems. So that, Tony Conrad said the same thing. Artists break laws that aren't even made yet.
Right. Yeah. They're all futurists.
They're futurists. Yeah.
Whether they like it or not.
It's like,
Joyce, you got to give it to Joyce. He almost reinvented language. He almost reinvented the novel, I should say.
yeah,
I couldn't read Finnegan's Wake, but I've read but I've read Ulysses, I don't know,
yeah,
half a dozen times, because the Molly Bloom soliloquy is some of the
yeah.
greatest language ever written.
But I do invite you to join any of, there's many Wake Finnegan's Wake reading clubs, because the essence of the Wake is this, back to theater. It is, you have to read it with a group of people out
Yeah.
loud. That's the
Yeah.
only way you
Yeah.
can do it.
I
And I
bet.
mean, not the only way, but it really works, because then it
Yeah.
becomes like a hootenanny.
Can
It's like,
hear it. Yeah.
yeah, you can hear it. You got to be like Ulysses. You could have hotshot actors reading it on the radio and not look at the text. But the
Yeah.
way, you have to have the text in front of you,
All
because you
right.
got to see how they're mispronunciating each word.
Right.
Now, wait, I would do it differently. So you're so in tuned to
Hmm.
each syllable,
Hmm.
and you're doing the sound. It is quite an astounding experience, and I really recommend you try it sometime. I can
Well,
invite
that's
you
a
to.
good way to learn it. That would be a good way to learn it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because I've got a Dubliners that I'm going to reread now. I haven't reread in several years, and I love Dubliners,
yeah,
especially the story A Painful Case. I love.
oh yeah,
I just his short work. I just really appeals to me.
yeah. So we got about 20 more minutes, John. This has really been fun, and I think we could delve
Yeah.
into some other side topics I'd love to consider with you. Is what's the function of laughter?
To take you out of your moment,
Yeah,
to give you, it goes back to that dimensionality. Just it's I think it's a measure of our sophistication
Yeah.
if we can laugh a lot. And especially, if we can identify something with our laughter, like satire or absurdity or things like that, I think that makes the laughter even more rewarding, as opposed to just slapstick, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But if we're laughing at ourselves, I think that's even more enriching.
That's
If we're
Gurdjieff.
laughing at the mirror, that's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
good.
You perfectly led into it because Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. And
Yeah, yeah,
Steve Allen would say behind every joke, there's a grievance. Now,
yeah.
let's not say every, but what do you think of that? Behind a joke, there's a grievance.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I think that tragedy and comedy work well together. I mean, the great comedians, that's what they used. Jerry Lewis was perfect at that.
Yeah.
He used, despite what people might think of Jerry Lewis, but the absurdists.
Yeah.
Beckett was really good at that.
Beckett's the king. Yeah.
Comedy and tragedy along the same lines that he could almost simultaneously. And
Dude, and if you haven't seen, my friend made a film. Beckett made a film called Film. You can
yeah, I've
watch
seen it. Yeah,
with Buster
yeah.
Keaton, but there's a film called Not Film, which is a documentary about that film. You have to see it. It's unbelievable. They
Oh,
have
okay.
they
Yeah.
have audio of Beckett speaking, and he didn't know he was being recorded by Barney Russell. I mean, it's got some amazing stuff in it. And you can see it online, Not Film. Check it out.
Not
But
film.
here's,
I'll write
yeah,
that down.
yeah, it's by Ross Lippman. But it is funny because you perfectly help me flow into the next question. And I would ask people, can satire be destructive? And my friend who wrote Comedy with Robin Williams says, that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Um, I think it's like what Corso called humor, which is the divine butcher, and I think that's
Oh,
what satire is.
Gregory Corso called humor what?
The divine butcher
Now, what does he mean? How do you interpret that?
cuts through everything. Humor, it cuts through satire, cuts through everything, and gets to the core of the issue, the problem, the nature of it.
Yeah, dude,
Satire equalizes everybody.
it equalizes, man. You teach me so much, John. I'm really appreciative. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
I don't know that there is much difference. Not much
Dude,
difference.
that's the answer I want to get, John. I
Good.
love it. No, that people go, oh, men are linear and rational, women are emotional. We hear
Yeah, I
that.
don't. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hear people say there isn't. And I love it because it says physical aside. Well, you can't separate social and physical and all these things.
Right,
But,
right.
but it was really beautiful you said that. But my follow up is what caused matriarchy?
The same thing that caused patriarchy.
Which is,
Probably, huh? Um, I don't know. I think it was just you had to have a structure to to the things that were going on in the early days. You had to call it something.
you
You
had
had
to
to
call it something.
sequester people. Men
Yeah.
had to be different than women.
Yeah. No, that's funny because Peter Sellers, the great opera director, I says, what caused matriarchy? He says, a mother holding a baby. It's biology that caused
Yeah,
matriarchy. They give birth and we
yeah,
don't. They
right.
nurture. Blah, blah. So there's a line, John, that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into "You are what you hate." Back to Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist."
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
line, you create what you resist, not you, but like one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Um, yeah, it's a way to explore yourself.
Yeah,
It's a way to get to play. I mean, why do art unless you can't go to another dimension, unless you can't go to another place? And resistance is one of the great impulses of humanity. And so we're attracted to that. I think we do it as when we're kids. We learn resistance. We learn our how far we can go, our boundaries, our limitations, and resistance is one of the great impulses that we have. It's like going back to the Great Escape. The impulse was to escape. The impulse was to resist and
yeah,
freedom. And that to me is one of the great uh, nuances of art
it's
is to
beautiful.
resist.
So,
I think a poem is an act of resistance,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
In a world of war, in a world of autocracy, in a
yeah,
world of tragedy, you have to be able to resist. You have to be able to create your own freedom.
yeah,
Create your own creativity in order
yeah,
to, because you're not going to fight it with weapons. You're not going to fight it with your mouth because you're going to get killed. Um, you have to do it with art.
yeah.
You have to resist.
That's what I like, John. You can really wordsmithery, the language we're dealing with, which is spoken word. We could have done this whole thing with gesture and dance, but it's like,
Well, yeah, yeah,
we're doing it with television, telephone.
yeah.
So here's,
And you're doing it with great quotes from all sorts of segments of our society, of our
yeah,
world, from philosophers and poets and teachers
yeah,
and so forth. And so, yeah, that sets the mind off.
yeah. So here's 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. One, who started it all?
The gods.
I love it. Is that a capital G or a small?
Small, very
Yeah,
small. Yeah,
very small. Two,
all of
are
it.
we it's like that bumper sticker. My God believes in your God.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, are we going to make it?
Yes.
3, where do we put it?
Wherever it'll fit.
4, who's cleaning it up?
Us. We'll have
5,
to.
5, is it serious?
No.
Man, you got it. Zappa said, I'm very serious about being not serious.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's all humor. That's where humor comes from.
Yeah. How do you find peace of mind?
Oh, walks in the desert,
Yeah.
meditation, uh, nature,
Yeah.
a lot of the cliches. Uh, uh, Literature,
Yeah.
especially. I think of wonderful lines like Amiri Baraka, the poet who said, this was a poem. He said, if Elvis is king, who is James Brown? God?
Dude, I need that so bad. If Elvis is
Elvis
king,
is king. Well, who is James Brown? God?
now I've studied James Brown deeply for many years, and I
Yeah.
was lucky to interview Amira Baraka with all these questions once.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's one of
Wonderful.
my heroes, man. That guy
Yeah.
was Amazing.
Philip Whalen. Let me quote you a real short poem
Yeah.
by Philip Whalen, and it kind of this is all kind of always makes me feel better. And the title of it is "If You're So Smart, Why Ain't You Rich?" And the poem goes like this: I need everything else, anything else desperately, but I have nothing, I shall have nothing but this. Immediate, inescapable, and invaluable. No one can afford this being made here and now.
Wow.
He wrote
You're
that back in 1955.
1955. You're laying me on some of the heavy ones. I wrote out the whole Ellen Hinsey poem because you
Yes.
quoted, you recited it. You know, that the beauty is at our Joyce reading in Dublin the other day, this kid just recited a poem in our discussion. And I mean, that's the beauty of poetry, is that you can pull it out of thin air and hand it to someone on a silver platter by just reciting it.
Yes, and it goes back to the old, one of the great old sayings, not all that old, but I think it was David Meltzer who interviewed, uh, I believe it was Sonny Rollins, towards the end of his life, and Sonny Rollins said one of the great quotes, and it applies to literature as well as music. Meltzer was trying to get him to say, how do you do it?
Yeah,
How does it happen to you? How do you make it happen? This thing that you do, this improvisation, this music, and I guess he Sonny Rollins thought about it for a long time. I'm sorry, not Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane,
okay.
and he thought about it for a long time, and he said, "Well, I put it down. You got to pick it up."
Oh my God.
And that's the way I always kind of thought, and I thought, it's like the playwriting and the poetry is really kind of a public art
Yeah,
as well. It's all public. And all we can do is just put it down and hopefully somebody will pick it up.
that's the co-creation. Mer-
That's exactly, that's the shot. Yeah,
that's a
that's right.
yeah,
That's the collaboration
yeah.
between, the
Collaborate and
audience. Yeah.
that's the best way to describe Finnegan's Wake is American Indians, indigenous natives. They would go from tent to tent and go, "Oh, dude, what'd you dream last night? Oh, okay. Well, then what happened?" So then the asker of the questions became the co-creator of the dream by the way they were asking the questions,
Right.
because you can't so
Mhm.
but I'm glad you said Sonny first, because one of my favorite Sonny Rollins is after his concert, he would go backstage and keep playing. And the guys in his band would go, "Dude, we're done." He goes, Sonny would go, "I'm still trying to work things out."
Right. Yeah. Just right early on in his career, but he was really hot, and yeah, he had reached what he thought was an impasse in his career and his music, and he wasn't going anywhere. So what he would do, and it's legendary, you've heard it. He
Yeah.
went for 2 years and would play sometimes all night on the Williamsburg Bridge,
Yeah.
just by himself, and just work it out, note after note after note, and just work it
Yeah.
out. And he did it until he didn't record any albums, he didn't do anything else. He just went on the bridge and practiced. And he didn't for 2 years. That's what he did. And then he came back refreshed and said, "This is it." You know, Malcolm
Totally.
Lowry spent 20 years a drunkard, a total drunkard, while he was writing one of the great masterpieces of all time, which is Under the Volcano.
Yeah.
And he had one of the great lines kind of early in the book when the council, it's 24 hours on the Day of the Dead, the last 24 hours in the life of this British consul to Mexico, and he's drunk, and his friend tells him he goes into he goes into a church, he looks around and walks back out, and his friend says, "You are too baracho to pray. You're too drunk to pray." And I thought, God, what a line that is. And you
Wow.
just think about it, and it encapsulated the whole novel in that line.
Wow.
And because maybe that's what he needed to do, was pray, because he was destroying his life. And but
Yeah.
at the end, he does a very heroic gesture before he dies. But yeah, it's just an incredible book. And then uh, it's that kind of thing that keeps you going.
Is the John Huston film pretty accurate to the book?
No, no,
No. Oh, sad.
no. It's a simplified version of the book is many layered.
Wow.
It's incredible. It's up there with Joyce. It really is. It's an
Wow.
extraordinary piece of literature. It's an extraordinary act of nature, is what that book is.
It
And
must be, because you brought it up last time and it's like
yes, I
resonating
did.
in my head, you
Yes,
know.
I did. Yeah.
Okay, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Keep walking down the street. Don't look back.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Spirit.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
The sumac. The stinking sumac tree.
Nice. If a statue was built in your honor, John, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I want it displayed. What would it be made of? Where would I want it displayed? I'd want it displayed in the middle of the desert, and I'd want it uh, made from like the mesquite, bark of the mesquite,
Oh, nice.
and it would last a long time, but eventually it'll go back down to the earth.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
More than two wives.
That is a good answer. You know, the three things I get that more than two wives. The answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
Heroin. Yeah.
Okay, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I would. I would wonder why.
Wonder why. John, you are so fun. This is great. But I will tell you one of my favorite answers, because being a poetry guy, you'll love this. This woman on the Venice boardwalk, I asked her that question. I learned it from this guy you would love. He's like, you know, an Alta cocker who sat on Venice Beach, and he used to hang out with Mingus and Billie Holiday in New York, and he was just the coolest dude. And he taught me that question. I love it. And people like, ugh. And this
Right.
woman said, well, I would take the velocity of the bag of shit coming at my head and I would use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I says, dude, that is Descent in the Maelstrom by Poe. You use the broken pieces, you know, to
Right.
get your way out.
Well,
So what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Resistance.
Yeah. Couple
Resistance.
more and we're out. Yeah, a couple more and we're out of here, John. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
we use violence
Yeah. Why
in this
we
country to yeah, to get ourselves out of, about any human situation. We use
yeah.
violence, and that's always distressed me.
Holbrook. Come on, we should be teaching conflict resolution. I said that, and this woman says, I've been teaching it in schools for 20 years. They teach people conflict resolution. Come on, my friend said one day, sit down and eat a pizza together.
Yeah,
Just don't resort to military action because you have
no,
a conflict resolution is doable. You
it
know,
is. I think in all walks of life, it's doable.
all walks of life. John, how has poetry, writing plays, writing shaped your behavior?
Oh, it's made me more aware. It has made me, and I hate to say this, and please take it with a grain of salt. It kind of made me be better in tune with the universe,
Yeah,
and made me understand and comprehend things a little bit better, made me more sensitive, I think, to what
yeah,
goes on around me,
yeah,
which language is a good way of doing.
yeah. But I would say spending this time with you in part one and two, there's something inside you that enabled you to realize that that was the vehicle I could use to become more aware. You
Right,
know,
right.
there's something.
And I appreciate you finding me and me finding you, and so we can explore
Yeah,
these wonderful things that you had on your mind.
yeah. Well, here's a doozy. Thornton Wilder, 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Staying out of trouble.
That's good.
It it I could have gone several different directions in my life, but luckily art found me and kept me from indulging in my worst notions, and kept me fairly sane.
That's a. I asked a great musician once, "What's the function of music?" He says, "To keep people from going insane."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
John, what gives you the most optimism?
Uh, I think just relationships with people right now at my age, they
Yeah,
become more precious, more valuable. I've lost, friends throughout the years that meant a lot to me, and so now um, my friendships have become more precious, more precocious. Um, uh, have camaraderie has more meaning for me now, and I think just relationships with people, you doing this, our interchange back and forth is important,
yeah,
and it makes us both think about things that we might not normally think about, and that's real important at my age, our age.
yeah,
Um, Whereas, I've reached the point where I'm not going to live forever. I just discovered that, so it's
yeah,
it. I have to have other people now
yeah.
talk to me.
It's a good summation because two jokes is one, or one joke is Paul Krasner said, "I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives."
That's right.
And my friend said, whatever happens to you after you die is whatever you believe happens to you.
Yeah, I believe that. I think
That is a good way.
that's a good way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think so.
So the first question I asked you in part one was, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question I asked you is exactly what Groucho Marx said. They asked Groucho at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of people out there who would, make me want to refute that. But by the same token, it's just no. I honor my friendships. I honor my
Yeah.
relationships now, although they are fewer and far between what they used to be. But the value of them cannot be denied at this
Yeah.
point in my life. And yeah, it's just yeah. Who am I going to bounce ideas off of?
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, yeah.
Well, it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerry. I appreciate it. It's wonderful.
Really great spending time with you, and I hope we can meet in person someday. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope
I sent you a couple
I
of books,
got
didn't I?
them. I'm sorry I
Yeah,
didn't respond directly to them. I did get
that's
them.
all.
I know they're in my piles of books to
Good,
be
good,
read,
good.
and I appreciate all your time and energy with these two podcasts.
Well,
Even though I'm
thank
going to
you.
hit the end, yeah, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever, even after we
Absolutely.
both die.
I'll
I'll,
send you some. I'll send you some addresses, some people
oh
to
yeah,
get a hold of.
I'm always a welcome for more, and we'll someday. I'd love to do a salon with like 6 poets with you and
Yeah, it'd be
playwrights.
fun.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really fun.
yeah.
Okay, thanks again, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Gerry.